Welcome back. A group of bipartisan lawmakers just returned from a fact-finding mission inside Mali's deadly war zone. The four Americans met with military officials in the country's capital and discussed how the U.S. can help Mali regain control from Islamist rebels. Meanwhile, today, French troops are involved in what officials call, quote, very violent fighting in the northern part of that country. It is part of a final effort to drive fighters from their mountain hideout. Joining me now, two politicians from the delegation that just returned yesterday, Democratic Senator Chris Coons from Delaware and Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass from California. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Tamara. Thanks
Absolutely.
for chance.
Senator Coons, on your trip, you were quoted in an article saying the U.S. is likely to eventually resume direct support from Mali's military, but only after full restoration of democracy through elections. You obviously have Americans wondering why we would supply direct support to Mali's military. Why was it so important for you to go there?
Well, I think it was important for our delegation to go there so that we could meet with the American ambassador, Mary Beth Leonard, so that we could meet with the military commanders who are both leading the multilateral African force. We met with the Major General from Nigeria, who's leading AFISMA, and with the Minister of Defense from Mali and his leadership, and with the French military commander, and to get a briefing from our own diplomatic and intelligence community about the situation on the ground, and to have a chance to question the French, the Malian, and the multilateral military commanders about how they saw the path forward. We also had a chance to meet with some of the folks who had fled from the north, who are seeking shelter in the south, and to hear from them personally about what circumstances were like in Timbuktu, in Gao, in Kidal, some of the northern cities where they've suffered under jihadist rule over the last 9 to 10 months.
And Congresswoman Bass, obviously, this is one of those examples where we as Americans must keep our eye, if you will, on the ball, for example, in Mali, because we saw what happened in Somalia and in Yemen as well, where groups linked to al-Qaeda or jihadists are able to infiltrate and potentially be a threat to this country.
Absolutely, and I have to say that another meeting that we had that was very critical was with the interim president. But you know, if you look at the situation in many of these countries, until you address the underlying social and economic conditions, especially with very young populations, when you have tens of thousands of young people who are unemployed and they feel as though they have no hope and no future, then they're perfectly susceptible to al-Qaeda or other problematic groups like that. And so I think it's very important that our country contribute. We are continuing to contribute humanitarian aid, but we also need to support the Malians as they prepare for their elections in July, and we need to do everything we can to make sure that they have good governance and they're able to address some of the underlying problems that led to the collapse of their
But you and I will know that people will hear your comments and say, wait a minute, we're in the middle of this sequester debate here. We're talking about cuts to defense, cuts to the Department of Justice, domestic programs here, and we're looking at assisting this country. Why is it important?
Well, I think it's very important to stability and to our national security here. But, you know, having said that, there is no reason for us to have the sequester. This is a self-imposed problem, and I think that our Congress, both sides of the aisle, need to come together. But the Republicans in my House, I think, want to see the sequester move forward because they have a problem in their belief as to what the size of government should be. And they're not recognizing the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of jobs that will be lost if the sequester moves forward.
And Senator, let me get your comments and thoughts on that. As I mentioned, we're in the middle of this sequester stalemate, no meetings planned here, and when we're talking about assisting another country, and certainly you can point to the threat that it could pose if things get out of hand in Mali, but you have folks who are looking at potential job loss here, and they may wonder where the priorities lie.
Well, Tamara, I think part of why it was important for us to go and visit Mali and see conditions on the ground in Bamako and elsewhere was to further understand just how real and how significant a threat al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb, or AQIM, poses to Mali and to other countries in the region. I'll remind you, 3 Americans were killed in Algeria just a few weeks ago in a terrorist-led kidnapping and attack on a gas facility in the Algerian desert. And the same folks who led the attack on the Benghazi consulate have been linked, although remotely, to the folks who've been taking action in northern Mali. And just this week, the French military seized, I think it was 35,000 tons of Libyan arms that had been relocated to the deserts in the north of Mali. This is an area the size of Texas, and al-Qaeda affiliates had been seeking to use it as a new base from which to launch attacks on France, on American interests, and on regional African allies. Yes, facing the sequester, facing record deficits, we have financial challenges of our own in this country. But in this particular situation, where our allies are doing the fighting and where the hard work of reconciliation and a restoration of democracy in Mali is possible, I think it's wise for us to contribute and to support these efforts by the French, by the Malians, by the regional African forces who are willing to step up and take the fight to al-Qaeda in this part of the world in northern Mali.
Senator Coons, Congresswoman Bass, thank you both for your time, and we greatly appreciate you joining us right from this big trip that you've made. Thank you.